can you start off by telling me your name and a little bit about your career in the Navy?
My name is Ryan Graves. I was a lieutenant in the Navy for about 11 years. And I was with the VFA 11 Red Rippers. In 2015, we were aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. While we were off the coast of Virginia Beach, what we were seeing out there were essentially radar contacts that we didn't think belonged there. Two aircraft from my squadron were flying out to the area one day. They were about 100 feet or so apart. As they were flying through the area, the lead pilot in this aircraft saw an object zip right by his aircraft. What they described was a dark cube inside some type of clear sphere where the corners of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. When the crew came back, they were shocked. They're like, hey, we almost hit one of those damn things. There was really no answer of what it was. And so our squadron filed a safety report, and we continued filing reports.
Ryan Graves and many other pilots reported these strange encounters with these unknown aircraft that had no wings, no cockpit, no intakes, no exhaust, and that were somehow seemingly able to fly.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
They began to have numerous encounters, weekly, almost daily in some cases. This continued month after month, year after year.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to pilots, both civilian and military, say, hey, Lou, the reason why I didn't report this because I didn't want to lose my job. I got a mortgage to pay, I got kids. You know, if I report this, they're going to think I'm crazy.
So we've been battling this stigma for a while. But I couldn't just ignore the things that I was seeing just because everyone else was uncomfortable talking about it. It's just a matter of time until there's a mid-air collision.
You can't muzzle, you can't squelch the truth. Our entire democracy is based on the principles of truth.
We get reports every night.
I don't know what the hell it is. It looks like a rotating light around it. I'd like to report a UFO.
The government's UFO files are stored here at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Notes, documents, and interviews on 12,618 UFO cases. Since 1969, the investigation has been closed.
They said all of this stuff was not to be taken seriously or believed. Even though there were 701 cases still on the table that were unexplained.
There is nothing in Air Force files that come to a conclusion that spaceships have visited the Earth.
When the government said, you're not seeing what you're seeing, that immediately created a distrust in the government.
UFO activists have gotten mighty vocal in recent weeks.
We want the truth! We want the truth!
Because of that mistrust, people developed all kinds of conspiracy theories. Many conspiracy theories start with a kernel of truth. So you had a lot of focus, for instance, on Area 51, a secret facility in the Nevada desert.
The base has been cloaked in secrecy for decades.
Area 51 is the place where some of our most advanced legendary aircraft were developed in secret for the CIA and for the Air Force. But the excessive secrecy launched an entire mythology that they have crashed spaceships that are being reverse engineered at Area 51.
Area 51, where the military has conducted...
For the past 50 years, classified experiments involving extraterrestrial technology.
What can you say goes on at this test facility?
Darn little.
Part of the mythology is that there's an alien craft stored there, and this stems from a crash of something in Roswell, New Mexico in the 1940s.
For people who are deep into the UFO experience, they believe that whatever was discovered at Roswell was taken at some point to Area 51.
If there are, in fact, any extraterrestrial type equipment or anything that's been recovered, it's most likely out here somewhere.
I've been to Area 51 on more than one occasion, and it was just really interesting, some of the stuff. They had a Soviet helicopter, but my personal feeling and all the knowledge I have, I think anyone that talks about having wreckages from outer space, and I just don't think that exists. But the American people want information. The one way we always get in trouble in government is trying to hide stuff, trying to be non-transparent.
Harry Reid played such a critical role to the progress that we've made on the UFO issue. He instigated a program at the Department of Defense to investigate UFOs, and he became very outspoken about the need for an official disclosure and transparency.
As far as I'm concerned, there needs to be a tremendous amount of government resources put into this, because the American people are entitled to know what the hell's going on.
The New York Times detailing our nation's secretive search for signs of intelligent life. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program purportedly dates back to 2007, and one of its patron saints is said to be former Senator Harry Reid.
The military spending millions of dollars to look into UFO sightings and videos from American fighter pilots all being made public.
The New York Times article that came out in 2017 started this journey for us as a country. It revealed several things. First of all, the fact that the U.S. government was still looking at UFOs, and that there was enough information there to convince a lot of people that it was real.
When you learn about a program on UFOs, and then we see the videos were released, and well, this is fantastic. What we've now had to come to grips with is that we have not learned hardly anything about the specifics of what they did in this secret project.
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
You can only imagine what they have and what they've learned in this secret program that they're not revealing to us. When are we going to have access to that?
If you hide the information rather than revealing it to everyone, then it becomes much easier for it to be seen as conspiratorial. So being able to shed light on all of this and make it available for objective study can eliminate the conspiracy aspect of it. Any of this.
With the information we have right now, there's no reason, in my opinion, why they shouldn't do some public hearings on this. It's a perfect time to do it.
Harry Reid remained involved with this right up until the time that he died. Thankfully, there was another person in government who came along to carry on his legacy and pick up the torch.
My name is Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm a senator from New York, and I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. On the Armed Services Committee, over the last decade, we've had very minimal reporting on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And I was talking to some staff, and they said, well, if you are interested in this topic, you should really talk to Harry Reid. So I called him and I said, Harry, I'm really interested in this issue of UAPs. Can you give me some advice on it? And he said, well, it's really important and you should definitely work on it. The more I sort of pushed on this issue, the more I realized that our armed forces were able to capture video footage of unidentified aerial phenomena. But over time have decided it's best to say nothing if you see something that you can't identify, because you may well be seen as someone who is crazy and that it will harm your career. We just need to know the facts, and that is certainly our responsibility as members of Congress to demand those facts.
We spend a lot of time, a lot of resources ensuring that our aircraft operate safely, and to think that we would ignore a potential safety issue because of a little skepticism around a three-letter acronym, it just doesn't make sense. I thought that we had to express this in the public light and make it okay to talk about, not just for people, right, but for elected officials.
The pilots know what they are seeing. They're not crazy. They are seeing something which is there, and there are documents, photographs, images that prove that there was something we did not understand.
As a number of these pilots came forward, interest in Washington seemed to increase in this topic. And those pilots actually briefed members of Congress about what they had seen.
I did have the opportunity to go to the Pentagon personally to tell my story in a classified environment. Other pilots went there to discuss this as well.
I'm Alex Dietrich. I'm a retired naval officer. I served 20 years in the U.S. Navy.
My name is David Fravor. I'm a retired Navy commander, Super Hornet pilot, where I flew for 18 years for the United States Navy.
Dave Fravor and I were asked by the Pentagon if we would agree to go into closed session. We spoke to some individuals in Congress, giving us a chance to talk about the incident. We were flying a training exercise in Southern California off the coast. Commander David Fravor in the lead aircraft, he was the commanding officer of the squadron.
We look down and we see a long cylindrical white object with rounded ends, roughly 40 feet long, that looked like a giant Tic Tac.
When you have a face-to-face meeting with these pilots, when they describe in detail the incidents and the encounters, and you feel the emotion, it becomes virtually impossible to deny that this is something serious and something real.
One of the meetings with the highest group of officials was supposed to be 30 minutes. It was an hour and a half. They literally did not want to leave. And a couple of them were enthralled, like could not stop asking questions.
Concerned should we be about the briefing that you received on UFOs? Is that a concern for pilots?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into any of the contents of the briefing. It was a classified briefing. The military and others are taking this issue seriously, which I think in previous generations may not have been the case.
Some of my colleagues are very interested in this topic and some kind of, giggle. But I don't think we can allow the stigma to keep us from having an answer to a very fundamental question.
Clearly something's going on. The American public wants to know, and frankly, we deserve to know.
Congress wanted to get to the bottom of this, get everything on the table that was known about it. Ultimately, Congress did something unprecedented.
For many years, government investigations into these close encounters were shrouded in secrecy. Now the curtain may be lifted.
They asked the intelligence community to provide them with a report about what they know about UFOs.
In June, the Pentagon will issue a report to Congress. The release next month of a highly anticipated military report.
For this report from the Director of National Intelligence, we didn't know how responsive the services would be, the Air Force in particular. We were very eager to see what they would come up with.
The U.S. intelligence community has finally released its highly anticipated UFO report.
The Pentagon is taking it seriously, saying it's possible this is a national security issue and a danger to flight.
In this report, it states specifically that there were 144 incidents that this report reviewed.
Now, the study released on Friday found only one of those can be explained, just one.
There were 18 incidents that showed unusual air characteristics. Start, stop, hovering, incredible speed, things that they couldn't explain.
The report established that UFOs are a real physical phenomenon. It also stated that they were not American technology, and there was no evidence that they were either Russian or Chinese.
So we know that. What we don't know is what caused this phenomena.
With the coming out of this report, it's opened up a door because the report, in effect, is inconclusive.
They came back with a report that was pretty lame, I thought. I said I could have written it when I was in the 5th grade. Very short, nothing.
It was very clear to most people that the Air Force was conspicuously absent for that reporting. And I think some of that goes back to when the Air Force was tasked originally in Project Blue Book to look at this topic of UFOs.
Their civilian astronomer, Dr. Alan Hynek, became increasingly dissatisfied as a scientist because they weren't approaching it in a scientific way.
And we've always honored accredited media
When they want to investigate a given specific sighting, there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at all.
So this just continues the fine, long tradition of the Air Force neglecting the UFO problem.
The Air Force, of course, has the most sensors, the most capability, and the responsibility for monitoring air and space. That's the primary source you would turn to for information, and they were not forthcoming.
What I fear is that government will feel they were asked to do a report, they did a minimally acceptable report, and now they can go back and forget about it. I fear that.
When I joined the Intelligence Committee, I began to see that we weren't actually getting the reporting that I thought Congress would have been getting on UAPs. That gave me very serious concern that we're not given the information we need to do our jobs.
It's like trying to put a puzzle together when the pieces are in different rooms all over different buildings.
Dr. Hynek told me very wisely that there is no such thing as a U.S. government. There are a number of agencies with their own focus, their own technologies, and their own budgets. So it's very difficult to get those agencies to converge on a new phenomenon that doesn't seem to belong to anyone.
Government agencies definitely need to play a role in gathering data about UFOs, but if they don't organize this data and centralize it, then a lot of it could be lost. We know of at least one case where the material was passed around from agency to agency, and that was the Aguadilla case.
Aguadilla is an incident where the local airport detected a UFO. They notified the U.S. Customs Enforcement aircraft with a sophisticated infrared camera system. They were able to observe it and film it for 5 minutes or so. It's a curious little craft that doesn't appear to have rotors. It's unclear how it manages to fly without wings. When people say, how come there are no pictures? Well, here's quite an extensive video officially taken by the U.S. government of yet another UAP.
The Aguadilla video was shuffled around in Homeland Security, and apparently they sent a copy of the video to the Air Force and said, could you guys tell us what this is? And the Air Force replied back, why don't you contact a civilian UFO group? And so that's how we got access to the video.
This is the object that's being tracked by the Homeland Security aircraft. You have latitude, longitude, coordinates, and you have all the information, and pause right there.
Currently, I'm an executive board member with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. This organization consists of about 160 people. Almost all of them have backgrounds in science. We provide a location where scientists can actually come and research the subject without the stigma that's often associated with it. We broke the video down into individual frames and looked at it frame by frame. And the first time I saw the video, I'm watching it and you see this little dot moving along. And then, to me, you see the object go into the water. And I can hardly see a splash. I mean, how did it do that? But the really exciting part was it comes out of the water, and then you see two objects.
Right there, now there's two objects. The pilot, you'll see, he's magnified because he's like, what in the heck is going on?
When I looked at it frame by frame, to me, it was crazy. It was clear to me that there was not another object that came out of the water. I thought this object had simply split in half and became two objects. That's what really made that video so anomalous. But I have no explanation for it. That's just what the data showed.
The Aguadilla video could have easily fallen through the cracks. There are probably other videos that just sit in some agency that we don't even know about.
We had this video and data at the Pentagon. We actually had this. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more videos there. It's not up to me to release or talk about, but I can tell you that I've personally had access to them along with my colleagues. There's some that are extremely compelling.
We need to have a place where all this information can be brought together. That is what a responsible, thoughtful approach towards something you do not know what it is would be. And so that's what I put into the defense bill, and that is what is going to be in place moving forward.
The headlines are screaming about legislation from New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
A bipartisan amendment proposed in the National Defense Authorization Act would create a permanent office.
Permanent government office tasked with investigating unidentified aerial phenomena.
These are serious issues of national security and technology that we should know about.
In December of 2021, Congress enacted the Gillibrand Amendment, which created a new office to study the UAP phenomenon.
What I would expect it to be is some of the brightest minds in the whole country focused on this specific review. Mathematicians and scientists and astrophysicists and people who understand how to look at this phenomenon and analyze it.
The people interested in this have been calling for this for so long, and that it's finally happening is just amazing. And this is only the beginning. The legislation that was proposed by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was important in so many ways, but one thing that stood out was she wanted the office to research materials that are allegedly connected to crashed UFOs.
We should never be afraid of what we don't know. I know nothing about crashed materials. I don't even know if they exist. If there are any, of course they should be studied. And if we don't know what it is, it's not an appropriate response to say, well, then let's not look at it.
I'm Gary Nolan. I'm a professor of pathology at Stanford. My background is in genetics, microbiology, virology, and cancer biology. When some scientist friend heard that I was working on UFOs, he said, well, you're going to ruin your career. It got me mad. It's just data. I'm not coming to any conclusions. People have been seeing these things for so long, and somehow we seem to feel like we need government to tell us that it's okay to believe in it. I don't agree with that kind of approach to life. I don't need anybody to tell me what it is that I know is real.
Gary's a Nobel nominee and a Stanford researcher, and he's just now coming out of the shadows. He's dealing with something here with the UAP phenomenon as just something outside of our current understanding. But that doesn't mean we should shy away from it. It just means we should understand it.
I've got some of them with me.
In your opinion, does the U.S. government have crashed materials in their possession?
Yes.
What's really important about physical materials is that they could possibly reveal that these were not from Earth. Gary works with Jacques Vallée on these studies. Jacques, he's a computer scientist and astronomer. He also has been studying UFOs, of course, and has been one of the most original thinkers in that field.
Well, I brought some of the other materials here that we've been looking at. I mean, there was 30 pounds of this dropped on the ground in a molten state.
There are a number of cases where people saw an object coming from the sky and crashing in a field, and they've recovered something. When I spoke to physicists, they said, well, you know, Jacques, you know, it's fascinating, but you haven't given me something I can take to my lab, something I can put under a microscope, but that's started to happen in the last few years.
This is a magnesium isotope ratios for Ubatuba.
I wonder why people always expect it to be very complex, you know, metamaterials.
One of the cases that Jacques and Gary studied involved a UFO event that occurred in 1957. Jacques had collected samples and he brought them into the lab and worked with Gary on the case.
The Ubatuba event was the fisherman. He sees a glowing object over the ocean that suddenly exploded and just shattered these magnesium chunks, bright silvery metal, all over the ground and in the water. The fishermen went back and collected this stuff.
Decades later, Gary was able to study it in his lab.
He found that for the magnesium sample, the way it was held together was something that had been manipulated.
It's pretty clear that they were part of some industrial process that had engineered them to be different. That is interesting. Maybe it was being used for propulsion. Maybe it was used for energy generation. It's a physics we just don't understand. But who couldn't be excited about potentially understanding it? Because imagine what we could do with it. If you could so easily move from one place to another, as in the videos that have been seen, the energy that is necessary to do that, who needs coal-fired power plants anymore? So that, to me, is one of the most important parts about thinking about the phenomenon. If you take the data off the table, and you don't allow it to be part of the solution could be staring you in the face, but you just threw it in the garbage. That's not how a scientist approaches science.
Fear grows in darkness. It's essential that you have light and transparency. There's nothing to me that is frightening or worrisome about research and study and analysis. That is what scientists and academics are extremely good at. It is what they are there to do. So why not use our best and brightest to get a clear handle on what's known and what's unknown?
Now, the UFO topic has been authenticated as real by the government, so that has drawn people in. There's just a much wider arena of people that are involved now.
When the government came forward in the form of the report from the Director of National Intelligence and talks about objects they cannot identify, that's very significant. If the government doesn't really know what they are, then it's the duty of the scientific community to come to the help of the government in figuring it out. So a month after Pentagon report, I established the Galileo project in July 2021.
A team of international scientists is embarking on a new research project that just a few years ago would have been dismissed as very fringe.
What Professor Avi Loeb has managed to do is create this body of scientists who are willing to say, to hell with social stigma. We're going to have the courage as a scientific community to look at this topic from a scientific perspective. That is in itself revolutionary.
At Harvard, astrophysics professor Avi Loeb is hoping to collect scientific data on the kinds of mysterious objects that have been spotted by fighter pilots.
The Galileo project would look at unidentified objects near Earth and try to identify the nature of interstellar objects that enter the solar system from outside, whose nature is unclear. We will keep the data open, not classified.
What Professor Avi Loeb has managed to do is create this consortium of like-minded scientists. And when I say like-minded scientists, I don't mean believers, okay? I mean scientists, all who agree that this topic is worthy of study.
I look at problems differently because fundamentally I'm a farm boy. I used to drive the tractor to the hills of the village and read philosophy books because I was mostly interested about the fundamental questions. How did everything start? Is there life elsewhere? If we see an object in the sky, we should not assume that it's natural or human-made, but rather get more evidence on it if it doesn't look familiar. So this is the roof of the Harvard College Observatory. It's an institution that existed for more than 170 years. This is where the telescope system will be.
Over there?
Yeah. What we will have is a dome-shaped array of infrared cameras that look at the entire sky at all times. We will monitor the sky and have an artificial intelligence software that analyzes what we see and tries to identify whether it's a bird, a drone, an atmospheric phenomena, or something else. We allow for the possibility of an extraterrestrial technological origin, which makes us different from the rest of the scientific community that does not even allow for that possible interpretation.
The Galileo project is an extraordinary step that Dr. Loeb has taken because you have the credibility of a major scientific institution behind it. And it's giving people permission to talk about it. And this is a turning point.
On November 10th, 2021, there was the Ignatius Forum that took place in the Washington National Cathedral. It was attended by the head of NASA, Bill Nelson, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, Jeff Bezos, and myself.
My point is simple. Let's look at the sky and check if there is any equipment that were sent by other civilizations. And that's the goal of the Galileo project.
The Ignatius Forum was a discussion about the theological implications of discovering a smarter kid on our cosmic block. It was fascinating for me to sit next to Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, when she made a statement that some of the objects might be from an extraterrestrial origin.
The main issues that Congress and others have been concerned about are basically safety of flight concerns and counterintelligence issues. But of course, there's always the question of, is there something else that we simply do not understand that might come extraterrestrially?
To me, that was very revealing because it now appears that government is willing to discuss that possibility of an extraterrestrial origin.
Avril Haines, who is the director of national intelligence, saying that it was possible that the strange encounters could be extraterrestrial life.
She said they may be coming extraterrestrially. She opened up that door to that possibility. It's a sign of how things have changed.
Imagine one of these objects happened to be from another civilization. That would change the future of humanity.
People want to know, is this otherworldly? Is it from our solar system? My hope is that the UFO community, along with government officials, will work together in a way that will answer some of these questions.
I'm just about to talk to Representative Andre Carson, who is going to be holding open hearings on UAP. It's been more than half a century since hearings in Congress, so it's like major news that we're having open hearings. There's an email that just came in, conference line in 10 minutes. Hello, Mr. Carson. Thank you so much for taking this call with me.
What an honor, thank you.
I mean, I'd love to know, what you really hope to accomplish from having the hearing next week.
UAPs present a very real national security risk, and this is an area of high public interest. Any undue secrecy can serve as an obstacle to solving the mystery, or it really could prevent us from finding solutions to potential vulnerabilities.
I think for far too long, people have said, oh, the public isn't ready to know about these things, but I think that the public is ready, now more than ever.
The House Oversight Committee will host its first public hearing on this issue since 1969.
Representatives from the Pentagon will be asked questions by lawmakers about what the U.S. government knows about all those strange lights in the sky.
These things very well may be real, and it's about time we heard more about what our government knows about them.
This is really an historic moment. It's a milestone that we are having an open congressional hearing about UFOs.
I wasn't asked to be here, but I felt personally I wanted to have the opportunity to come down here and try to take this thing full circle, frankly. The Navy trained me as a safety officer, and at the end of the day, we have objects that are nearly hitting these aircraft, and it is a safety issue, and it's a tactical issue, and it's a strategic issue.
The subcommittee will come to order. The last time Congress had a hearing on UAPs was half a century ago. I hope that it does not take 50 more years for Congress to hold another, because transparency is desperately needed.
The members of Congress represent the people of the United States. The people want information. Congress wants more transparency from the Pentagon on this topic.
Undersecretary Moultrie, Mr. Bray.
The two witnesses that are being called are high-level officials Ronald Moultrie is the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. And Scott Bray is Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. Both of them obviously know a great deal about the Pentagon's research into UFOs.
There have been no collisions between any U.S. assets and one of these UAPs, correct?
We have not had a collision. We've had at least 11 near misses.
Do we have any sensors underwater to detect submerged UAPs?
So I think that would be more appropriately addressed in closed session, sir.
Okay. Can you say with 100% certainty that they are physical objects?
I can say with certainty that a number of these are physical objects.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed flying over sensitive military facilities. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it.
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty high-profile incident. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
Overall, it's a huge step that the hearings even happened, but it was frustrating because they just didn't say that much.
The Pentagon says today's hearings, while it may not find new answers, will help with how these reports are handled.
This could be the first of several hearings, with some lawmakers saying next they would like to hear directly from some of the pilots who have encountered those objects firsthand.
Overall reaction to the hearings, I thought it will be a cover-up at some level, and I feel like that's what it was.
How you doing, Ryan Graves?
Yeah, right. He was one of the pilots.
Oh, good gosh. God bless you.
How are you?
How you doing? Well, so you got a pilot right here, and he should have been the one talking in there, okay? He should have been the one talking, explaining what the heck was going on. Congress needs to give those pilots some sort of whistleblower's protection and some guarantee that it will not be a mark on their record, and we need to bring them in. You talk.
Well, I just really appreciate that everyone took the time out here in order to pay attention to this issue. From my perspective, getting energy on this is simply just going to save lives at the end of the day for our Navy operators. This is something that the American populace is very interested in, and I think that they deserve to know what's going on.
When our own military fighter pilots, the best in the world, they're up there and they're saying, what in the world is this? We should be concerned.
Congress is doing exactly the right thing. If their constituents are demanding answers, then Congress needs to demand answers.
That's what the constitutional framework of our democracy is all about. It's about oversight and accountability, and each branch of government having a responsibility.
Now that the government has acknowledged that UFOs are real, they're physical, they're a national security concern, it raises a lot of questions. The main one being, what are these things? Where are they from? Why are they here?
The truth about UFOs is easy to summarize. The UFO phenomenon is real and maybe the greatest scientific problem of all time.
What do you think these things are?
Let's try to break it down one by one in terms of the technology that we see. We now know that these objects go between Mach 5 and Mach 20, 20 times the speed of sound. They can fly in the air, and they can go even underwater. What could be behind that? Why should they go underwater?
Surprisingly enough, we've explored more of the moon than we've explored of our ocean floors on this planet. So our ocean floors are just as much of a mystery to us as are some of the moons orbiting some of the planets in our solar system.
People ask a lot, well, what do you think they are? When I started out, I was probably pretty convinced of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that they were just visitors from another planet. But I've come to learn since that the phenomenon is way more complicated.
It was traveling at fantastic speed.
It was a series of about 6 lights in the shape of a cross.
It seemed to be rotating, and it was hovering.
There was a rim of light in the shape of a triangle.
3 of us up here saw it. The length is unbelievable.
They're so diverse, I just don't think it's as simple. Disc-shaped ship that has traveled here from some planet far away.
If we succeed And if we find that indeed there is an alien intelligence of some kind in our atmosphere, it is going to be something that changes our worldview, changes our understanding of our place in the universe.
The way I see science is as a service to society. The knowledge we obtain from studying the universe is relevant for everyone and benefits everyone.
Do you think we will find evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence in your lifetime?
I think we already have. I don't need to think in the future.
Why is there so much debate? Why all this controversy? Because what's at stake is nothing less than our role in the universe.
It roots back to watching that space race as a kid growing up.
Standard speed down 3.5.
Overall, the world benefited from having that sense of wonder and that commitment to move human knowledge forward. That all applied to the unidentified aerial phenomena question would spur innovation, tremendous thinking, production of knowledge, and that's why it shouldn't be locked in a secure vault someplace.
It's exciting to see there's a lot more attention being given on the subject of UAPs. I hope that things don't go back, and then 70 years from now, we're still wondering what the UAP might be.
The truth about UFOs. Man, that's the one question I was gonna say you should ask me. The truth is that no one knows what they are. But we have the ability to figure it out if we want to.